Welcome to the show, Profiles in Excellence, coming to you from the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss IT success stories at numerous government agencies and hear from the key leaders that are making them happen. We will be doing the show in 3 segments with 3 different groups of federal executives. With me on the first segment are Richard McKinney, the Chief Information Officer, Department of Transportation. Renee Wynn, the Chief Information Officer at NASA. Sonny Bhagowalia, the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Treasury. And David Bray, the Chief Information Officer at the FCC. Let's stay with David and get into the discussion. David, tell us about maybe a business problem or a mission goal you set out to address at the FCC, and tell us a little bit about the program.
Sure. So when I arrived at the FCC 3 years ago, they had a situation where they were spending more than 85% of their budget just to maintain the IT systems. It was a case of where we had 207 different IT systems, average age more than 10 years old, and that situation was only going to get worse. Added to that was a challenge that there had been 9 CIOs in 8 years, and so I'm sure that's always a sign for the 10th CIO that things are going swimmingly.
Yeah, that's the old adage, CIO career is over.
Yes. So success was, in 2 years, we went from having 207 systems all on-premise that we were maintaining to now 100% of the FCC is either public cloud or commercial service provider.
Wow.
We actually don't maintain anything ourselves. That has brought our spend down from being 85% to maintain our systems to being less than 50%.
Wow.
More importantly, in the past, it would have taken 6 or 7 months to get a new prototype if you had come to us with requirements. Now that we're cloud-based, we can actually get you a working prototype in less than 48 hours.
Very cool, very cool. How about some of the challenges along the way?
So the challenges were 80% people, 20% technology. The average person had been at the FCC for 15 and a half years. The average contractor had been at FCC for 19 years. Mm-hmm. And here I am asking them to trust me as CIO number 10 in less than 8 years to make the move to public cloud.
Terrific. You're a great leadoff because, you know, as I mentioned, we have done 145 shows. And when we talk challenges, the issue of people and culture has come up every single time. I mean, with everyone, as opposed to just technology. Any lessons along the way that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, so to build on what you were saying is, I would say that the number one lesson is bring empathy, bring listening. I think actually the best type of C-suite leader, CIO or anyone, is one that's actually playing the role of counsel and therapist to the organization. And one of the things I like to say is there are no IT projects. There are simply mission projects that have IT baked into them.
I like that. That's good. I'm going to steal. Do you mind if I steal that from time to time for my show? Let's talk to Sonny Bhagowalia from Treasury. Sonny, tell us about a problem or a mission, that objective you had with a program at the Treasury Department.
So yeah, Treasury has a large mission, and obviously, you know, based on looking at the financial system of the country, the collection that we do, and the disbursements, we're talking several $1 trillion of the GDP of the United States flowing through the system. So I think keeping things secure and reliable was a really important mission. We were able to also improve to about maybe 75% O&M versus maybe a 25% the development, modernization, enhancement. But I look at more like this, that, you know, it's like, to use an NFL analogy, we gotta kind of look at just being secure and reliable, and,
right.
And we have done a tremendous amount of work in terms of just making sure that the infrastructure is really working. And we live in a world where the cyber aspect has gone up tremendously across the United States of America, not just the US government.
Absolutely.
And so protecting against that, which we don't talk about and we don't want to, but there's a lot of stuff being done, which is fantastic work by our government, kind of like the O-line and D-line, just, you know, they don't get the credit.
I like that.
So
I like
I
this
want to
analogy.
go with the coach and the quarterbacks getting the credit and the running backs. I want to credit the application operations folks who are the O-line and the D-line being the cyber, that behind the scenes there's a lot of good work being done by all of us in government to really keep that going.
Well, cybersecurity is certainly a front burner issue right now, right across the board, and I think both sides of the aisle, it's important. So I think that's something that's with us for some time. How about some challenges along the way?
Well, I look at the world of a transformation for any CIO, and I'm sure I can commiserate with all the CIOs, that we look at people, policy, process, technology, governance, right? Mm-hmm. And we all know which one's the hardest one. begins with a P. And I think the answer is that in that we have to work the culture, and I think we have to understand that how people look at this transformation, right? So we got to celebrate the kind of good things they're doing, but then get them ready for this new world where technology changes in not 18 months of Murphy's Law, it's like 6 months.
Right.
And then while we got to keep these legacy systems going, and it's amazing in government how some of these systems have been going on for years. And then how many cyber attacks that we block? Some of these scales are millions of attempts a day.
Yeah, the numbers
so the
are
scale and size and
overwhelming.
complexity and the sophistication and brazenness of these attacks, I think, against the United States, I just, again, applaud all the agencies, and I think Treasury's also done a good job there.
Fantastic. Good work. Great story, Sonny. Renee, Wynn, let's tell us a little bit about NASA and some of the programs or a mission goal that you set out there, and perhaps a little bit about the program.
Great. So I joined NASA, and after 2 months, I was made their CIO, and I had been at EPA for 25 years. And so talking about a steep learning curve and a steep acceptance curve, you know, fortunately, I went to charm school here in Washington, D.C., which is actual fact, so I could just turn that one on. But really, my focus from day one was how do I get 10 centers with really smart folks, right? They are rocket scientists. How do I get 10 centers going the same direction on important projects that are both capabilities associated with our missions, which is both airplane associated as well as satellite and rockets associated, and how we can level up in the cybersecurity way, because in some instances, I found we were working against each other and not really against the outside folks trying to get in that we didn't really want to come in and they weren't invited.
And what are some of the big benefits you've seen coming out of these programs?
So our big benefit was certainly made public this past week, and that is to be able to move the dime on our report card for FITARA. I mean, and that is to go from an F to a C+ in such time. And during the hearing, I had the confidence because I knew that I could bring the teams together and get them to focus on the goals at hand and how to have that clarity in working together, and that by working together, we were going to achieve a lot more for NASA than we were not really combining what we were trying to do. And there was a level of simplicity that also needed to happen. NASA, like many federal agencies, are a lot of go-to folks that really want to do a lot, but sometimes you get too much on your plate, and we needed to thin that out and sequence them so we could really start to make a difference, not just in the FITARA, but in across the board in how we manage IT. And NASA, in some ways, is a little bit special with regard to its IT, because our IT flies at low Earth orbit all the way up to high Earth orbit, and of course we've gone to Pluto, and we've got some great missions going around Saturn right now, seeing things that we've never seen before because of IT inventions.
Right. Terrific. That's good stuff. And I love the analogies. You guys are great with this. How about lessons learned? Things you'd like to pass on to our listening audience in terms of perhaps help them along the way down the road?
Great. So I'm going to borrow from sports as well. So if anybody is trained for a marathon or a triathlon, and you just got to stick with it on that hot August month, and you don't want the hot August run when you really don't want to run, and go ahead and just click the miles away. And that's just perseverance. Finding ways to sort of re-energize yourself, because you've always got to stay in the game fresh in order to lead folks to it. But perseverance, a little bit of cheerleading, a little bit of cajoling, and some tough conversations. And so you have to also have the courage to stand in the face of very stiff winds sometimes, but know that on the other side, you'll have greatness on the other side. And there's a lot of, pulling what David said, there's really a lot of learning and listening. And certainly for me, I don't know anything about rockets or satellites. So it was a great opportunity for me to be a little awestruck in what we get to do, and then work with them on areas where I could actually bring value.
Terrific. Well said. Well done. Yeah, when there is no wind, you row. Let's go to Richard McKinney at the Department of Transportation. Richard, tell us about a program that you're proud of that happened over the last year.
All right. Just about a year ago, we were making the move to Microsoft 365 in the cloud, and a number of the operating administrations, modes as we call them at DOT, expressed concern to me that the more we moved to the cloud, that they were unsure as to whether or not our network would be able to handle the traffic. So, and they knew that, and DOT's network is really a collection of 8 or 9 separately architected and designed networks. So I took their concerns seriously, and I hired a company called Decisive, and they came in, and the objective was to sort of do bandwidth capacity planning. And But this is a story of sort of unintended benefits, unintended consequences, because what happened is they came in and installed a technology called Riverbed. And the Riverbed technology allowed us to, for the first time, see all the devices on our network. And we started with the known list of devices that all the operating administration said, here are our routers, servers, load balancers, here's the IP addresses. And what Riverbed discovered is we discovered about 200 devices on our network that we didn't know about and that we weren't managing, which sounds like a terrible thing to admit, but it was a real eye-opener for the department because we realized that this federated approach to network management had left us vulnerable. What had happened is, field offices and whatnot around the United States had cowboyed their way and installed devices onto our network, and we weren't managing, no one was managing them, and so it was a huge cybersecurity weakness. The good news is that we used that list to clean all that up, to bring all those, to replace those that weren't, industrial grade routers and switches. We replaced all that, got all our devices up. Now we understand everything that's on our network. We have the ability to log into it, manage it, make sure it's patched correctly, configured correctly. And we also now have the capacity to know if anything is attached to our network that we don't know about, we're instantly alerted and we can take appropriate action. So we set out to do, and we did get to where we understood, bandwidth and capacity planning. So our original goal was met, but we ended up with this huge side benefit that really changed, I think, the conversation in the department about why do something as fundamental as a network, why are we doing that in a decentralized manner?
Right. Excellent. And how about some of the lessons learned, benefits along the way?
Well, the lessons learned that the old way of doing things doesn't work.
Right.
If we're all going to be connected to one another, we have to have an architecture, we have to have standards, we have to have robust and enforceable change management processes, and we have to do things smarter than just stitch everything together and hope it all works out.
And lessons learned that you'd like to pass on maybe to those tuning into the show?
I would think that any federal agency that wonders about their network might want to engage in a similar discovery to make sure that you know what's on your network. Don't take it for granted that you know all the devices. Find out.
Excellent point. Interesting to me because I actually did teach cybersecurity at graduate level for 18 years too. On Saturdays, we always people would talk about the perimeter security, data in motion protection, data at rest protection, but people oftentimes did not think about the devices inside the network. Then we learn about an FBI investigation where a high percentage of the equipment is counterfeited and there's all kinds of malicious code and malware that have been attributed to that. So interesting thing for me for this discussion with the first group of everyone has brought up something around cybersecurity. So let me real quickly, we got a couple minutes left here. Let's go back to David. Do you think we will get to the point where we'll get out in front of the issues? I mean, do you think it's getting better?
So I would go to the analogy that in World War II, you would not expect the U.S. government to say we're going to build all the airplanes by ourselves. Yet it seems like with IT, we seem to be doing that to a degree. And what we really need to do is be leveraging what can be provided by the private sector and then be focusing on a mission context. So when we made the move to public cloud, it was partly to get out of the death spiral of just spending too much on maintaining our systems, but it was also a recognition that you will get the many eyes approach of using a public cloud that has their cybersecurity professionals plus your own cybersecurity professionals looking at what you have. Right. So in addition to that, we moved to VDI. And so I assume that my network is, build your network with the assumption that it's already been compromised.
That's a guy, I think that's a good way to look at it.
And then sort of change the conversation from being just about cybersecurity to being about cyber resiliency. I think in today's age, you should go to your leadership of any department or agency or in a private sector, your CEO, and say, if you want 100% security, disconnect from the internet, bury it underground, and make sure no human being
Focus
touches
on the
it.
resiliency. How fast can we recover?
And engineer with that, with minimizing
And
the dwell
talk
time.
to, in a language the senior people can understand. Don't necessarily talk about bits and bytes, talk about risk management and
It's
risk
all
to
about
the
risk
organization.
management, and then leverage the strengths of what the private sector can provide.
Sonny, what do you think? Getting out in front of this stuff?
I think we are. I think just coming again from a Fortune 30 company, sort of working it from Boeing company all the way up through FBI and my entire career in federal, state, local, tribal. I've noticed one thing, that we always seem to be fascinated by technology, but we never really focus on what data is really needs to be secure and what high value assets really we need to secure. And the rest of the stuff can be open data. And I think we too often get focused on technology and some policies and processes, forgetting about what is the real data that we need to protect. And so I think that's one aspect of that. I think the supply chain is a problem from many aspects as well in our country.
Another very good point.
We don't have enough folks in America who are checking this code that's being developed everywhere, and so how do we check that and make sure it's secure? But at the end of the day, I think the core thing is, what is that motivation? What is that data that people really covet? And so I think from the high value asset standpoint, I feel that in cyber, we need to look at that. And lastly, I'll just say, we have got to make sure that the common denominator is people, and we have to train them so that they can conduct their mission, but be vigilant. And so we have put in a lot of things to kind of be watchful of that. And guess what? It's almost like the same sports analogy.
Yeah.
The adversary keeps on using that until you block that play. So spear phishing is definitely one of their attempts and one of their TTPs. And we obviously look into that, and as do some of my colleagues.
Excellent, excellent. Well said. You know, I used to joke that it's disappointing that we have the term firewall, because if the code was built to be secure to begin with, you wouldn't have to put a firewall between the code and the people using it. Renee, what do you think? Are we getting out in front of the cybersecurity issues?
I think we're
Your
changing.
Pateric score says yes.
It's a point in time. I think what we've done is we've started to change the dialogue on cybersecurity, and that's where it has to change. And that is this is not about a risk to a CIO or to a CISO or anything like that. This is a risk to the enterprise and to the reputation of the business or the federal agency.
Well put.
And so if we can change the dialogue, and not in IT speak, but in the way businesses need to change, supply chain check, codes, are we checking syntax error and potentially cybersecurity errors, and building that in from the beginning. And so empowering people to do their jobs at NASA, from where I'm from, is both, from my perspective, a safety issue and security issue, and they dovetail very nicely. And if we can move to making that part of the fabric of what NASA does, as we know, safety is hugely important to NASA. But if we can put that and security and change the way we do business, which is where we're going right now, that's when we will make a difference in terms of the aggressive pursuit of our assets through our firewalls, if you say.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. Richard, you have the last word for segment one. How do you think we're looking for getting out in front of this issue?
You know, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that, you know, from the story I related to you, you know, I believe that cybersecurity, you know, comes with doing the basics right and doing them well. It's not something you buy and bolt on, but it's just the way you conduct yourself, the way you build and manage your network, your storage, your server farms, you know, your end user devices. And like the story I told you, I think that as we get smarter about that, and we as departments and agencies realize that you know, the interconnectedness of that we all experience, that we like to be able to exchange data and information, but we have to make sure that the way we do our basic blocking and tackling is fundamentally sound. And I think we're getting better at it. I tip my hat to Tony Scott and the efforts he's made around the cyber sprint. That was a real eye-opener for us.
Well, it's a way to get it up as a priority, to get attention.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we continue, you know, the high-value asset thing, you know, I think we're doing the right things, and looking at legacy IT, and again, you know, stressing the fundamentals, doing the fundamentals right.
Fantastic. I want to thank the panelists for taking time from your busy schedule to be with us today. Hopefully you can stick around for the segments that follow and hear from some of your your colleagues. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with our second segment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.